All right. Hey, and welcome back. This is Jason with Quantus Insight, co-founder, lead poster on all things election. We just dropped a poll today that's probably of a lot of importance to a lot of people following the Senate race. We started polling the state of New Hampshire Monday, early Monday morning, and we wrapped it up yesterday afternoon. And then we got into the post-survey analysis yesterday evening, and then last night, and finished it up this morning. And we have some results here that are pretty interesting. We did a hypothetical poll with Chris Sununu, former governor, four-term governor, and Chris Pappas. He's been in Congress since 2018. Relatively popular. I think he's got a lot of good standing in the state as a somewhat, I guess, of a moderate Democrat, meaning, or at least he has a really good bipartisan record. All the things that New Hampshire politics kind of rewards, and we'll talk a little bit about that and how that breaks down and some of the differences in New Hampshire, especially as it comes to state politics and inside their borders versus how we might see things in other states or nationally. But in any case, we did poll the hypothetical matchup, and we have Chris Sununu out in front, 53-44 over Chris Pappas. That is a +9 result. That's a strong standing, strong lead. There's going to be some caveats to these numbers, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But quickly, let's just go over. I'm going to zoom in here. So overall, 53-44, strong commanding lead. Sununu is winning independents 52-44. He's leading among men by 30 points, 59-39. That's a pretty huge margin. And among women, it's even, 48-48. And with his non-college voters, again, it's 58% support for Chris Sununu. Now, those margins aren't as good as they were when he was running for governor in some of his elections where he was winning, 60-something% or 57, 58%, and he was just really destroying his opposition with these crazy margins across pretty much all the demographics. But the governor's race and the Senate race are completely two different animals. They do not always equal and carry over one for one. You can ask Larry Hogan about that out of the state of Maryland. If we look at some key demographics here among the age, we have running relatively even among 18 to 29-year-olds. I was a little surprised by that result. The white vote, Chris Pappas is doing respectfully, I guess, as it relates to Democrat opposition against somebody like Sununu. He's pulling in 43% of the white vote. Could that number tick up? Sure, it could. The non-white vote, Pappas is edging Chris Sununu by 3, 49-46. Then we start getting to the opening up here in the age. So 30-54, Sununu's up 53-44. And then the 45-64, that's the biggest part of the electorate. It's about 37-38% of the entire electorate is that age demographic of 45-64. And Sununu is winning it by 16 points in that age demographic. And then the 65 plus, the margins shrink again. But we do have a pretty good strong start for Sununu. Again, hypothetical. He hasn't announced he's going to run yet, and neither has Chris Pappas. But I think that's where they're reading the tea leaves and where the things are going, especially with Shaheen exiting. Somebody's got to step up and defend the seat. And then it's just been speculation since Sununu decided not to run for re-election after 2024 that he was probably going to jump into the Senate race. And I think that's where we're likely headed. Hence why we jumped out early on this poll. If we look here at the Republicans, Sununu's pulling in 94% in a very early poll, 4% going to Democrat, which is standard, and then 2% undecided. Could that number be 95 and 96% as it gets closer to the election? Yes, that's probably where it's going to fall. Again, this is an early poll. It's not. This isn't going to reflect what it's going to be closer to the election. We'll talk about that in just a sec. And then we have some apprehension here. It looks like among Democrats, only 91%. I say only 91%. That's still very good. 91% of Democrats are backing Pappas, 6% are backing Sununu, and 3% are undecided. Again, does the same thing apply for Chris Pappas as it gets closer to the election and the campaigns are underway and the voters have two choices? Yeah, those Democrat numbers will likely tick up to 94, 95, 96%, typically where you would see it, because the partisan divide will take over. This isn't the governor's race. There'll be a different electorate, different issues to vote on, different issues to campaign on, and it'll just turn into probably a typical breakdown of what you would expect. Now, it's not to say that Sununu couldn't pull a little bit of Democrats just by his name recognition and sort of that command residual that he has as a longtime popular a governor, high approval ratings, high favorability ratings across the board. Never really much of a competition in terms of opposition, except his first election in 2016. He won by a couple of points. And then after that, he was just racking up ridiculous margins. Now, the independents, Sununu's out of the gate with a 52-44 lead among independents out of the gate, early polling here. The reason why that is important is because in New Hampshire, this is typically how your partisan affiliation breaks down. So there's more Republicans that show up and vote as opposed to Democrats. However, the independents outnumber Republicans and Democrats as well. And your independents, they tend to vote a little left of center, are very moderate, a lot of split ticketing and things of that nature, as independents do. So that is a very important part of this electorate that will decide the race. The better the margins among independents, the more likelihood that you're gonna be okay on election night. Now, let's talk about some caveats of this poll. It's a +9 poll. Do I think it's going to be a +9 result on election night or election week? No, I don't. I think this race will tighten up. Again, it won't be like the governor's race. Now, that's not to say that Pappas might come out here and underwhelm and Sununu runs away with it, or vice versa. Sununu may come out of the gates and catch on like fire and tighten this race up. But neither one of those scenarios would surprise me. But what early in the election, 19 months away from 2026 election night, is early polls tend to reward those who have a higher name recognition. Sununu has a commanding residual based from his time in the governor's mansion and his time in state politics, which he has dominated since he's hit the scene. Voters are more likely going to vote for those whom they have higher name recognition, whom they trust, etc. So it's not surprising to me that this poll come out a +9, a +6, +9, but this one was a +9. And it wouldn't surprise me if this race tightens up as we get closer to the election as well. Because I think the partisan, the attitudes and beliefs will kick in. It'll be more. I think it'll be more of a competitive race. But I'm open to interpretation here. I'm open to see more polling. I want to see if anybody else comes and pulls this behind us, since it is heating up, since Shaheen has dropped. The speculation of Pappas jumping in, or even perhaps another Democrat. We went with Pappas because we think that's the likely play for Democrats, and of course we polled Sununu because we think that's the likely play for Republicans. Now, we made a couple of videos about the Senate map and what it might look like in 2026, and this terrible cycle that the Democrats have found themselves in as it relates to the Senate seats. There's not that many seats up for that are really all that competitive. We got about 5. And the Democrats are having to defend some very tough ground. They're having to defend Georgia, and if Kemp gets in, that's a lean Republican state. If Sununu gets in, we think that's a lean Republican state until we get some other data saying otherwise. So that leaves the Democrats holding on to Michigan and flipping North Carolina or flipping Maine. And if they lose Michigan, if the Democrats were to lose Michigan and say they flip North Carolina, it'd be a trade-off. But no matter how you look at this, the Republicans are probably sitting around 53 to 55 seats on election night. And that would just be a terrible place for Democrats to be, as we said in these videos. Again, you can go back and watch them. But we almost think it's probably 100% likelihood that the Republicans will hold on to the Senate. Even if the Democrats had a perfect night, they would still only end up with 49 seats, meaning to say they held Georgia, held Michigan, flipped North Carolina, flipped Maine, and held on to New Hampshire. That would put them at 49 seats. The Republicans 51 seats. So even if they run the board, they'll come up short. Now on the flip side of that, if the Republicans run the board, they flip Georgia, they flip Michigan, they flip New Hampshire, they hold on to Maine and North Carolina. I mean that puts them at 56 seats. So their ceiling would be 56 in this scenario, which is why we think it's 54, 55 seat outcome is very doable for Republicans. Now enter New Hampshire, and I should say exit Shaheen, and then enter these new players. The Democrats are defending New Hampshire. So we have political reports showing they had with Shaheen, they haven't updated this, but with Shaheen they had it a lean D. She's now out. So this moves to a true toss-up column at the least. If Sununu enters, then it's probably a lean Republican. Until more data says otherwise. But right now, we probably would move this over to the lean Republican camp. And if Kemp jumps in Georgia, we would move Georgia over to the lean Republican camp. So that's +2 seats out of the gate. Now, with Michigan being, I don't know what we would say about Michigan. We need to see more polls. We need to poll it as well, but we think it's going to be a close race. The margins just show that over time. The margins in Michigan have just close to almost less than a point now. They were 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020. The margins have just dropped down to now it was like 0.3 in 2024. And then we see this trend growing where Senate outcomes great. They mirror the presidential outcome of that state. The split ticketing era is not nearly as a part of election outcomes as they used to be 30 years ago or so. You're starting to see these Senate seats align with the presidential outcome 80, 90% of the time, more than 80 and more than 90% of the time. So in 2016, I think it was 100% of the Senate outcomes matched the presidential. And then in 2024, 88% of the Senate outcomes matched the presidential. Michigan not being one of those. They actually voted for a Democrat in the Senate, and even though they voted for Trump in the presidential, but it was a 0.3 margin. So, again, we'll see how this shakes out. But if you're a Democrat now and a Democrat operative, and you're part of the, getting Senate Democrats elected, this Shaheen dropping out and the specter of Sununu jumping in, this makes things even harder now for Republican or for Democrats to, have a good showing at the least. You'd hope you'd have a good showing on election night, but if this poll is correct and this trend stays, the closer we get to election, it looks like that the Democrats are in trouble of losing New Hampshire and losing Georgia. Again, North Carolina, that's probably going to be a very close state as well. Maybe the Republicans lose that state, or not. It just depends. Either way you look at it, though, the Republicans will hang on to their majority, and they have as good of a chance as not of even adding to their majority race. Especially if you start seeing more polls like this. If you're on the Democrat side, you're hoping Pappas can step up and deliver and catch hold there in New Hampshire and get the backing of the DNC, get the fundraising he needs, and hopefully make a race out of this thing and potentially hold it for the Democrats. All right, guys, if you like this video and you found it insightful, please like and subscribe. And until then, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.